Hey there, my name's Carolyn Dunn and I'm a dot mandala artist, and I'd like to welcome you to my channel. So today we're talking about how I varnish my dot art mandalas. And I use Liquitex varnish, so this will be about using Liquitex. I typically use the high gloss varnish because I love it. But it also comes in satin, and I believe there's a matte varnish as well. So this is what I have on hand when I'm ready to start. A couple of pieces of paper towel for any drops that may come along the edge, my varnish, and then I use a 3-inch high density foam brush. This is really pretty stiff, which is what I like. I got these brushes, but they're very spongy and they end up leaving bubbles and streaks. So I really like this. I get these at Michael's, although I haven't been able to find the 3-inch ones lately. So anyhow, this is what we need to get started. This is a piece that I recently completed, and it has one coat of varnish on it, but let's go through the process of varnishing. This will take another 2 coats before I'll be happy with it. Now I use Liquitex High Gloss Varnish, and there are lots of other products that you can use, but this one I have found is sort of self-leveling. The bubbles are very minimal, and it goes on very nicely with a foam brush. I use a 3-inch high density foam brush, and I usually leave about at least 4 hours in between varnishing. You'll know if it feels dry. And I just pour right onto the piece, and I always have a piece of paper towel with me, so if there's any excess I can just dab it off onto the paper towel. And so now we're going to start. I usually try and get around the edges first. Because sometimes if you have, especially if you have artwork right there, oops, some of your dots, sometimes they will not get the varnish if you just don't pay attention to those edges first of all. Okay, so I just try and get around and get my edges. And the thing is, it's so quick and easy too. And usually by about here I need a little bit more. And you're thinking, oh, she uses a lot of varnish. I don't skimp, because if you skimp, it leaves marks, like it leaves streaks in it. So I just like to get as much on there as I can. And if I'm taking off a little bit of excess, that's okay, because my piece is going to be lovely. Okay, then before I go around and do a final run on that, I like to get my edges. And as you know, you don't have a ton of time to work with this stuff. I'm checking my edges as I go around to make sure that varnish came all the way around. And I check underneath to make sure there aren't any little blobs hanging off. And if they are, I will just draw it back like that, a fresh piece every time, or a clean spot every time. Okay, and now we're going to start to just pull off any excess. Sometimes when you're doing this, it'll want to flow off the other side, so just be careful of that. And just always check your sides after you've done this. Okay, go around and check. And if you see any really obvious bubbles, you can blow them out. I just blow right on them. But they usually settle out, so don't be too concerned about them. And before I do varnish it, I always give it a dusting. I brush it off with a paintbrush to make sure there's no dust left on there. Okay, it's well covered, and anywhere you see it's still a little bit milky, it will dry clear as a bell. I just love using this stuff. It's so easy to work with. You don't have a lot of time to work with it, so once you've gone around once, pulled the excess off, leave it alone. Okay, and that's basically it. Again, I check underneath to make sure there aren't any drips that are hanging off the edge. And if there are, I grab a fresh piece of paper towel. I've got one right there. And I just drag it up. If you kind of go like this, it smears on the back of your piece. And I know it's the back, but it's all important. Lovely. And that is how I varnish. And now this is what our final piece looks like. It's so glossy and shiny. I love it. I always varnish the backs and sides of my piece before starting the painting, just to protect them from any messiness on the back. Now, if after your last coat you're not completely satisfied with it, there might be a streak or you touched it after it was starting to dry, just throw on another coat. Also, an extra coat gives it just that much more depth. A couple of other tips. One is, make sure your piece is fully dry. The paint has dried for at least 72 hours to a week, depending on how thick your paint is, before you apply the varnish. I usually give my pieces a week or two to fully cure before storing it until it sells. There have been some questions about how to store your pieces, either for in inventory, if it's not out on display, or if you're traveling to, say, like a craft show or something like that. Make sure your piece is fully dry, but then I use these foam pouches. I usually use them for shipping dishes and that sort of thing. I get them at U-Haul, and you can get them in different sizes. I know U-Line sells larger ones for the larger pieces. And then I just slip it in there like that, but you have to make sure it's fully dry first. Give it a couple of weeks. And then I can store these, are Lazy Susans. I can store them in a bin. I put a piece of cardboard between each one, and there has never been any sticking or anything like that. I used to put them in the bins and put parchment paper on either side, but the in and out causes some scratching on your surface when it's being done repeatedly. So I really like these foam pieces just for that reason. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Thanks again for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, sharing. I'm very grateful for those that do. And remember, keep on dotting.